Hello and welcome to the podcast. Pack your bags and wait. Let's talk about culture shock. And today I have with me Lily and Achille. And now we'll let you guys introduce yourself and tell us where you went and why.
Can I say ladies first and just go ahead?
Yeah.
Great. Well, as you said, my name's Emilie, and I actually went to Hong Kong with you as well. And the reason I went is I didn't really plan it that much. I applied for quite a few. Hong Kong was actually my third choice, so I just sort of applied for the American universities, which had sort of the better ranking or whatever. But I'm honestly, I think the happiest person alive that it ended up with me going to Hong Kong. And I've always been quite intrigued by Chinese culture and especially sort of Western and Chinese culture coming together. And so I thought Hong Kong was the perfect spot.
Nice.
Hello, Achille. So I'm in my final year of Spanish and management, and so as part of my program, I had to do a year abroad, and it had to be a country that's a Spanish-speaking country. And so I took Chile because I wanted to go to South America, and it was the only country available since it was COVID in South America. So yeah, I just love South American culture, and so yeah.
Nice. Did you have a culture shock? How did you feel about this? How did you react to this?
I guess the strange thing for me was that I actually did, I think, zero research before I left. I didn't even have a look online at a picture of what Hong Kong looked like. Um, and I just sort of went with the flow, sort of came with an open mind, didn't really know what to expect. But I must say, like now looking back, maybe I should have looked up a picture, but it meant that I sort of had a true experience and didn't really get spoiled or anything by other people's opinions, but just had sort of could make up my own opinion about it before I went. And that also meant that I had quite a few sort of culture shocks initially because I just really didn't know what to expect. I guess one of the great things about Hong Kong is though that it used to be an English colony, and I'm half English, so it wasn't that different. It was quite nice in the tube. You still sort of had the English announcements and everything, so you still sort of felt like at home at the same time as being in a completely different continent and sort of 1,000 miles away. But yeah, there's sort of not much of a language barrier because most people speak English, and it's sort of a mix of Chinese and Western culture. And the good thing is you have a lot of sort of experts around you, which are also international. So sort of that helps you a lot in adjusting to the culture and to the people. I think one of the first things was just arriving in Hong Kong after the 2 week quarantine and then actually being outside, and beforehand you could just sort of see through a window what it looked like, and then you were out and about and all of a sudden it was this massively overpopulated area of just millions of concrete buildings sort of surrounding you.
I also did have a cultural shock because I mean Spanish is not my first language, even though I've been learning it from since like a long time ago, and I speak it not that well, at an average level. So of course, Spanish is there's a language barrier because it's not the same Spanish as they teach you when you're like in class. They have like a very specific language with different accents and words that literally only exist there. So in that sense, there was a cultural shock. But I mean, honestly, you just need to like meet with locals and they explain to you like the intricacies of their and the specificities of their culture. And yeah, and so as soon as you apprehend those specificities, honestly, yeah, you just immerse yourself. On the other end, at first when I got there, it's a bit unsettling because it's a very different context. Like because I mean, it's not even on the same continent, and like people don't have the same philosophy, but just as soon as you immerse yourself in like the cultural context, you just become part of the culture, and the culture shock disappears.
Exactly. You sort of have to learn everything, or you sort of have to learn to love everything that sort of shocks you, and you have to just immerse yourself into that culture. And you can't arrive and just say, I'm English and only hang out with English people. You really have to immerse yourself in the culture that you're seeing and that you're experiencing. And part of that is getting to know locals. Part of that is talking to your neighbors. When I first initially arrived, I stayed at an Airbnb for a month of someone that actually lives in Hong Kong, and that was really great because they could just tell me a lot about it without me being sort of immersed to it all in one go. But they could sort of, one after the next, sort of introduce me to different things and give me different tips. And that really helped in sort of getting used to the culture and getting used to the people around me. And I think you really just have to be very open when it comes to that.
Yeah.
What were the elements that shocked you?
Well, I would say the way people appear in relationships, like the way how people interact, because you don't think about it, but it's really different. Like whilst here in the UK, it's very like kind of cold in some ways. I mean, in Chile, it's very passionate. Like when they speak, interact to each other, there's a lot of passion. They are more like personally and emotionally present in their everyday interaction. And so, coming from a place where it's less emotionally,
Expressive?
yes, yeah, it is very unsettling. And also, another element that surprised me a lot is the food. They really have a different relationship with food. I mean, of course, it's the geographical context is different, but it's really completely different. The way they cook it, the way they eat it, the like even their relationship with food is different. They don't just eat to eat, or like when they go out. Normally when you go out, you'd be like, either I drink or I eat. I don't try to mix them because well, it costs a lot. Just everyone there, like no matter the cost, they just mix everything. This is like have the vibe, like
You've got to eat.
embrace it. Yeah, but you have to embrace the vibe. Yeah.
I must say, I think we had very different experiences because I think getting to know sort of local people in Hong Kong is quite different. I think the way that they see relationships and not that I want to bog it down to one area, but I think the way that they perceive relationships is in a lot more of a formal way than Europeans would typically. And so I think initially when you wanted to get to know them, if they were in your classes or even in the canteen on lunch breaks or whatever, and you tried to speak with them, they were quite apprehensive in getting to know you. And you really have to try and sort of make an effort to try and get to know them. And that showed you a different part of how they experience life and especially how they experience university. For them, university was just going there to study, to try and learn as much as they can possibly do, to continue with their stringent rules of, of learning, of studying, of not really having as much free time, I think, as European students are used to or want to have. And I think a lot of the part of the exchange students that went was also of getting to know Hong Kong, which obviously local students don't really have that. When we're in London, we don't typically do the touristy things. We also just have our routine of going to university, being with our friends, and I think that was quite similar when I went to Hong Kong, in a way that it was quite difficult to get to know local students. And in terms of the food, though, what I must say was great is that the local Hong Kong food, man, so fucking cheap. Sorry, I hope I can
So
swear.
good.
Yeah, so good, really like incredibly good, incredibly cheap. And of course, like you saw them prepared as well. And it's quite different because there's a lot of sort of street food. And whenever, like, we lived in Sai Pun, and there you've got like streets of rows of streets of just essentially like markets and open food stalls,
With
which is
all the
really
dim
great because you could
sum.
just get like a full meal for, yeah, exactly. And you could get a full meal for like £3 and you'd be completely full up. And yeah, that was really nice.
Yeah. In my part, like in Hong Kong, I didn't have that big of a culture shock because I've been to mainland China before, and there I got the biggest culture shock of my life. I was like, oh my god, that is a complete different universe. So after mainland China, Hong Kong was a bit, especially with it's very international, very quite westernized. One thing that I was very unused to, very shocked when I was in mainland China, although it wasn't within the King's exchanges. I think it's quite interesting to talk about this, how everybody was taking a picture because I was a foreigner in China. They would be like taking pictures without
Yeah.
even asking, and I was like, "Whoa, what is happening? It's non-consensual." But then it took me, I think, I stayed in mainland China 2 months, and it took me a month to get used to adapt. And I think for like my first reaction was like, what is happening? I was shocked, and then in the end, after a month, I just started to get used to it and see it positively and try to understand their point of view of how they maybe don't see that often foreigners, and they would take pictures or understand their background and not think only from my point of view, because obviously if we keep on saying everything from our perspective we will be shocked. But
Yeah.
what did you do to adjust, to adapt and get used to the little elements that were um, that appeared as a culture shock for you?
Well, I think, I mean, we had a conversation about the pictures, and the same. It didn't per se happen to me in Hong Kong that much, but I think there's a stipulation around us sort of having a bit of a white privilege in Hong Kong, which was a bit strange in terms of a culture shock because in Europe, I don't know, so many people are white that you're just, everyone's used to it. And in Hong Kong, that was completely different. Like there was a lot of stringent mandates for COVID in terms of having to wear a mask. And whenever sort of we would go out as exchange students and we'd have our mask sort of below our chin or whatever, um, the police wouldn't approach us and they wouldn't say anything about it in comparison to when a local student was there, immediately police would come up to them and would say something. And so I think that was, I think, one of the biggest culture shocks in a very strange way of just being perceived in such a different light. And I think that also comes with the same sort of taking photographs and just in a way of not being idolized, but just, being different. I think it's very strange to be in a place, 1,000 miles away from home, and you're the odd one out for once, in Europe, which is used to being like everyone else. And I think in Hong Kong, for the first time, it was really like we're the odd ones out and we're the ones to adjust. And so I think that was quite nice in comparison. And I think in terms of adjusting, what I always thought was sort of the quicker you accept that you're not at home and the quicker you accept that the place that you're at isn't like home, I think the better it is. Because then you also start to be a lot more open, and I think friends help a lot as well. You need to surround yourself with people that also love the place that you're doing an exchange at. If you're surrounded by people that only miss their home and only sort of reminisce and only hang out with people from around their home or from the same country that they're from, I don't think that helps in you sort of having a full experience of also what the exchange is supposed to be like. I think it's very important to be with people that love the exchange as much as you do, that want to experience the culture as much as you do. And then, you end up going to various different temples together and exposing yourself to completely different religions and to completely different culture. And I think that's what's really important. And when you have other people around you that love that, it makes it very easy for you to love it as well.
I totally agree. Like on the point of exploring like new spiritualities and new like cultures. I also agree on the fact of like we don't. I agree that we don't think about white privilege, but when you're abroad, it is really something big. I mean, like I don't know. For example, when I was in Chile, literally, if you're white, you can do whatever you want. On this, I mean, it's not like on the bad. It's not a critic. It's just like the policeman will not look at you, like will see you from the even the people like the random individual look at you in the way that if you're basically a foreigner and you're white, it means what? First of all, you're wealthier, which is true in some ways, but also that well, you're not here for problems and you bring like the wealth to the country. They see you in a positive eye and they will not try to like they will try to put you in the best disposition to appreciate the country, which is of course when you're living there very nice, but it also raises the question of how do we act react to this position, you know.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think all of us just sort of got used to it quite quickly and thought it was quite strange, but also we all welcomed it with open arms. You know, none of us were like, "Oh, you know, we've got extra privilege. That's a bad thing." You know, it's also it feels quite nice in a way. You know, it's not like you feel untouchable, but you feel like you can do a lot more, a lot of things a lot more free. Especially when it comes to Hong Kong and in terms of the political situation. Um, we both, Emily and I both study international relations, so a politics based course. And I think when it comes to Hong Kong, as you know, in 2020 they enacted the national security law, and essentially that just means that you have to be very careful with what you say in a political spectrum. And I think when it comes to that and at university, um, and one part it was great because you learn a lot more about Hong Kong politics. We had this great course about Hong Kong politics, but on the other side, it's also very strange because you see the local students just being very careful with what they can say and what they can't say in comparison to exchange students that know they're only going to be there for a year, that have this added white privilege and have this sort of sense of being untouchable in a way of we could say and do anything we'd wanted to do and we'd be fine. And I think local students truly don't have that. And so it also creates a massive divide between these two different types of people that are trying to come together in exchange. So I do think it's important in terms of how we perceive that privilege and how we work with it, and how we shouldn't just welcome it with open arms, but sort of reflect on it and see why that is the case.
Do you want to add anything to the elements that shocked you in Hong Kong or Chile? Where exactly were you in Chile?
Santiago, I mean, it's basically just Santiago. I mean, 40% of the population lives in Santiago, so
Okay, any other elements you want to add, or next question?
yeah, I would add the last element, because when I thought about of Chile, because literally the only thing I knew about Chile before going there was there was a beautiful nature and it was a very thin and long country, which is not a lot. And so I would never expected Santiago or like even Chile to be how it was, because I expected to be less developed, you know, from what it was. And honestly, I was surprised and shocked in a way by how developed it is, because I mean it is a megalopolis. It is massive. I mean, there's more people in Santiago than in London. I yeah, I think there's more people in Santiago than in London. And that whole fact that despite not being in like a completely developed country, you encounter something that is, well, more developed than you could ever have thought, is honestly unsettling. But it is also like a positive reaction to it, because it shows that not on I mean, in my opinion, it showed me that not only it's not only in our like in places that we expected that those places are developed. There's also a lot of developed countries no one thinks about it. And I mean, honestly, I was surprised and astonished by the wealth and the development of Chile. Of course, there's like underdeveloped parts of it, but some parts are even more developed than us in some ways. And in that sense, it is interesting because it does change our vision of us being more developed than them, if I may.
Because we don't hear about this in the news. Maybe
Yeah,
that explains.
I think no one covers it.
Yeah. No, I think one thing it's not entirely related to it, but in terms of development, in terms of comparing the two cities, like when I compare London and Hong Kong, I always thought living in London and that I come. It's not the biggest of cities, but it's still a capital city. It's still quite a big and bustling city that's quite busy. But coming to Hong Kong, I must say London is nothing in comparison to that. Hong Kong is not only massive, not
Massive.
only completely overpopulated, not only has truly like concrete buildings everywhere when you're in the city, and it's crazy because you can sort of not really ever find a break. It's never quiet. It's always noisy. It's always busy, and that's also part of the beauty in it because you're in such a big city and you're constantly surrounded by the culture and constantly surrounded by its people and by its heritage. But at the same time, sometimes you really just sort of you wanted a bit of a break. You wanted like a nice park like you have in London to just catch a breath, be outside of the city for a few seconds. And I think that was a bit of a shame of not having that in Hong Kong. Of course, you had the great hikes and you had the great mountains and you had the ocean. So there's so many amazing things about it. But for that, you had to go outside of the city. So through that, you get to learn and get to know a different part of Hong Kong's culture and a part that's also more rural. Because the moment really in Hong Kong is quite small, but the moment that you go a bit further towards mainland China, the more rural it actually becomes and the more mountainous it becomes. And so that was quite nice in terms of just taking a break, having a bit of a quiet space. And I think one last culture shock element that I have to mention is obviously you are so close to China, like you can. What I did with a couple of friends of mine is we cycled alongside the border of China,
I
and
didn't do
I
that. I
think one
regret.
big thing for me was truly, yeah, you should have. It was amazing, but it was also really strange because you were sort of cycling alongside the border and you could essentially touch China, but you couldn't enter it no matter what you wanted to do. You couldn't actually go there. And I think that was quite strange because you really did feel somewhat trapped. And that's not essentially Hong Kong culture. That was just, I think, at the time in terms of COVID, especially. But you just felt quite trapped. And I think that's very easy to happen in such a big and bustling city as well. And so because of that, again, you need your friends with you that support you, that know that can give you a bit of that quiet space and a bit of that reassurance, to help you through it, because sometimes it can come a bit much when it's just so loud and bustling 24/7.
It's true that I remember when we were hiking. I don't remember whether you were with us, but we were on Lion Rock, and on top of
Yeah,
Lion Rock, you can still hear
you could still hear the city.
bustling city. It was you could see the
Yeah,
sound
and
of the city.
exactly, and in a way like that's quite beautiful and quite nice as well, but sometimes, and even when you go out like in the middle of the night, it's still sort of loud, like you just want a bit of a break sometimes. But that's part of the beauty in it as well.
Mm.
Is there anything you wish you would have done different? I wish I made more local friends and tried a bit harder.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of people that come back from an exchange say how amazing it was and how many friends they made, and it's so great because you make a lot of international friends from all of the exchange students that you meet. But I think one shame really is because you come back from it and you've got friends all over Europe or from America or from God knows where.
I, I mean, I agree. I guess if I regret something, I guess I could have made more. I could have made more local friends. But I think the true thing I really regret is not immersing myself enough in the local culture.
Hmm.
You see,
Because
this
I
is what I
appreciate it and I bathed in it. But when I think about it, I could have gone deeper in it. But yeah.
Same. I regret not having experienced the Chinese New Year with locals.
Exactly.
I
I
didn't
was
do
about
anything.
to say the same thing. I think after a while, and that's also quite great, but also a bit of a shame because after a while, you just sort of feel like you get used to the culture. You're not as shocked by things anymore after you've lived there for like 3 months. You just after a
But
while,
the
you
next
just
step is immersing.
exactly, and I think that's where the problem is, and I think that's where it stops for a lot of exchange students is they get used to it and they get comfortable in their surroundings and they're less homesick or whatever, but they don't actually make the next step of like fully immersing themselves into the culture, be that actually making friends with the local students, actually trying to, even if it's difficult, actually making that effort, be it on things like Chinese New Year, which I think is one of the biggest regrets of mine. Is I think I had a lot of uni work to do, or whatever I did that day, and I just fully regret it because I'm like, that's one experience that I'll never have again and that I truly missed out on. And I think as bad as it sounds, kids do your uni work and whatever, but part of the exchange is also that your grades don't count. It's pass fail. And I think one of the things I did from the beginning, and not a mistake per se, because I loved what I learned in Hong Kong, but I think I think I did a bit too much work for university. I think I should have kept more time to immerse myself into the culture, not every single day be so stringent about, doing all of the readings, or preparing myself entirely and completely for class. Instead, I should have also have combined that with looking at the culture, getting to know a lot of the local friends and people. And I really truly regret not having done that.
Yeah, same.
Mm.
If there is one thing you could tell to your pre-study abroad self, what would it be? I think embrace the culture, immerse, and try hard to integrate.
Yeah, I would say just run for it. Like jump in it. I mean, you got nothing to lose, and honestly, it's worth the while. Like embrace, immerse yourself, follow the vibe. Yeah, just have fun. Honestly, like go for it.
Study
Yeah.
less in the
I
library.
mean, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't even
Study
study. I
less, party more.
I
No,
didn't
I'm
study
kidding.
that much in Europe because it didn't count it, so I just didn't study a lot.
You see,
But
you did it.
I could have done worse because I was like, no, I'm gonna study a bit. I could have, yeah, but I mean, I like my subject, so anyways,
No, but I think you did it the right way, because you see, I love my subjects as well and everything, but I think I just put too much focus on my studies in comparison to the place that I am at. But I agree with like all of the things that you said. I would also tell myself, but I think what I thought of when you asked that question is actually just cherish every fucking moment. Enjoy everything, take more pictures, immerse yourself in the culture, and just take every moment as it is.
And one thing that I would add, I if I could tell that to myself, don't let the little inconveniences blurry the overall
Exactly.
picture.
Exactly. I think even when little things go wrong, or when you struggle in between, be that a culture shock, be that anything else, don't let that become the thing that you remember Hong Kong for. And, remember your study abroad for all of the things that were so great. And that's why I said, cherish every moment, and also enjoy the little things, and don't let, small inconveniences, or small bad things completely ruin the moments for you, completely ruin the experience for you.
And related to culture shock, if you're shocked to something, respect the culture. Like,
yeah,
don't laugh at it.
Yeah,
That is different. Because I remember I was shocked at other students that would laugh at what they were shocked at. Of.
exactly. I think that's quite important. Still be it's a different culture to yours, um, and first off, welcome it with open arms, and second off, if there's something that you're not used to that is very different to your culture, exactly, don't laugh at it. It's part of someone's culture, it's
yeah.
part of someone's life, and if you laugh at it, you just automatically diminish that culture for someone, and I think that is completely disrespectful, and shouldn't be done, because they're opening their arms to you. They're letting you into their country, letting you experience their culture, and you should be very reciproc whatever that word is, of that.
I
Because,
agree because people
sorry.
don't think about it, but the reason that like tradition and those like cultural shocks exist because well, each like society is based on different like emotions, and I think we're not like when you're shocked and you laugh at something or even you're shocked at something, you don't think about the reason why it exists behind it. But if you know the reason, it tends to be a valid reason, and so it is kind of smart in some ways. And so laughing at it is just a form of disrespect and like lack of acknowledgement, lack of knowledge, yeah, of like the local like cultural context.
And laughing at it will only build up the stereotypes.
Exactly, and I think
It's
one thing
only
you also said
a
is look at it from their perspective. And I think
misconception.
that's very important, and I think that's a way of avoiding disrespecting their culture, is looking at it from their perspective, seeing that it's part of their traditions, part of how they grew up, and that it's just nothing funny or nothing stupid, but that it's actually something beautiful as part of their own culture.
Yep. Well, that was all very, very interesting. Um, Thank you for sharing with us your experience, and we can see how culture shock can happen in different places such as Hong Kong or Chile. Um, and I am sure that that will benefit a lot our listeners, and that will inspire people to go everywhere, discover new cultures, and embrace everything. Yeah. Thank you very much, both of you, and bye bye.
Bye. Have a good day.